I remember the night my breath froze in the air, my body wrapped in one thin coat that wasn't enough against the biting wind. I thought, this is how dignity leaves a person, not with a scream but with silence. My teeth chattered against the echo of passing footsteps, the world blurring between yellow streetlight and black shadows. I had a coat, but it was thin, worn down like the spirit inside me. My ribs ached from hunger, and every breath felt like it belonged to someone stronger, someone more deserving. I pulled my knees closer to my chest, pretending the bench beneath me was a bed, pretending the night wasn't endless. My name doesn't matter as much as the bench I called home. It stood under a crooked lamppost, its paint flaking like old memories, shadows pooling underneath, where even stray cats hesitated to rest. I had once been like anyone else, an apartment with curtains, a job with deadlines, a place to return to when the city grew loud, but life unraveled faster than my hands could hold. A layoff that bled into unpaid rent that bled into eviction, and one by one the phone numbers of people I thought were friends went silent. The city never stopped moving, but I did. And in the stillness of that bench, I noticed every footstep that hurried past me and every one that slowed. That night, my stomach growled louder than the traffic. I tucked my chin deeper into the collar of my coat, trying to make myself invisible. That was when I noticed a boy, no older than 15, standing a few yards away. He wasn't dressed like the others, no headphones, no rushing stride. He just stared, as if torn between curiosity and guilt. His gaze lingered for seconds that felt like years, and then he turned, vanishing into the moving crowd. I thought that was the end of it. But 10 minutes later, thump, something landed beside me, a paper bag. Inside, a half sandwich, still warm. The bread soft against my trembling hands. No note, no words, just the sound of quiet footsteps retreating. It was the first meal I hadn't scavenged in days. I ate slowly, every bite soaked with shame and gratitude, the flavors sharp against my hollow stomach. My eyes stung, and for the first time in weeks they weren't from the wind. But as I chewed, one thought gnawed at me. Why would a stranger care? Why me, when the world had already decided I was forgettable? That night I slept lighter, half waiting for the boy to return. The next evening he did. This time, he didn't drop and run. He sat, awkward and stiff, on the other end of the bench. His sneakers scuffed against the concrete as though he was buying time to speak. My dad was a soldier, he muttered finally, staring at his shoes. He always said, if you see cold, bring warmth. If you see hunger, share food. His words stung in a good way, like medicine poured on a wound. For a moment I didn't feel like a man forgotten. Felt like someone worthy of an instruction. Passed from father to son. Soon, others noticed. A woman walking her dog slowed and left a thermos of tea by my side. A man from the corner store slipped me a pair of socks with the receipt still tucked inside. Some people avoided my gaze, whispering judgments as they passed, but others quietly, tentatively followed the boy's example. Kindness nugget number 1. Psychologists call it the contagion effect. One visible act of kindness increases the chance others will follow by up to 40%. I became the reluctant center of an invisible ripple. Yet as warm as these gestures felt, I sensed there was more behind. The boy's eyes. Something unsaid lingered like a shadow. One rainy night, as water dripped from the lamppost and soaked through my shoes, he finally told me his father had died overseas. The coat I wore, threadbare and thin, it reminded him of the jacket his father carried during deployment. He never came back, the boy whispered, his voice cracking. But I can't let someone else freeze the way he might have. His shoulders shook, and for the first time, I saw not just a boy but a son carrying a grief too heavy for his years. I sat frozen. That sandwich, those socks, that stubborn persistence, they weren't just kindness. They were his way of keeping his father alive. Then he did something that split me open. He unfolded a second coat, too big for him but strong, military green, smelling faintly of cedar. His hands trembled as he pressed it into mine. This was Dad's, he said, eyes locked on mine. It's yours now. That night wrapped. In his father's coat, I wept harder than the rain. It wasn't just cloth. It was armor against despair. Each stitch felt like a promise, each pocket a reminder that I was more than a statistic. And in that moment, survival stopped being about shivering through the night. It became about carrying forward a legacy of compassion. But make no mistake, kindness is not a fairy tale. The same week I wore that coat, I overheard men laugh as they tossed coins near me like I was an animal at a zoo. Humiliation is heavy, but the coat was heavier, and it held me together. Kindness nugget number 2. Studies show that giving warmth, literally, coats, blankets, reduces feelings of social isolation more powerfully than words of sympathy alone. If you believe kindness can ripple through even the darkest night, screenshot this moment, share it, and remind someone today. Warmth is never wasted, because what happened next proved it. Word spread faster than I could understand. A teacher organized her students to write letters. Each envelope slipped under the bench like secret treasures. You matter. Keep holding on. We see you. Food. Truck began leaving leftovers at midnight. A church down the block started a coat drive. And one evening I returned to find the bench empty, not because I had left, but because others were filling it with bags of clothes, stacks of blankets, and folded notes signed by strangers. It was no longer about me. Kindness had snowballed. The boy's single act, echoing his father's voice, had ignited a chain that turned a forgotten park bench into a symbol of hope. Volunteers began showing up not to pity me, but to ask how they could help others. People who once hurried past, with averted eyes now slowed, smiled, even sat for a while. My bench became less of a hiding place and more of a meeting point, a quiet monument to one soldier's words, carried through his son's heart. Then came the moment that broke me open completely. The boy stood there again, watching as volunteers carried items away to distribute to shelters. His eyes shone in the lamplight. Dad always said, "A soldier's duty is never done," he murmured. He looked at me not with pity, but with pride. My throat tightened. I reached out, gripping his hand. "Your father didn't just fight battles overseas," I said, voice trembling. "He's still fighting them through you." His hand squeezed mine back, steady and strong. Kindness nugget number 3. Neuroscience shows that kindness activates the brain's reward center for both the giver and receiver, meaning compassion literally rewires us toward resilience. That boy was proof. He wasn't just surviving grief, he was transforming it into fuel for others. I no longer sleep on that bench. I found shelter, then work, then a new way to stand on my feet. But I still carry the coat, not because I need it for warmth, but because it reminds me that kindness isn't charity's inheritance. A soldier's son taught me that survival isn't about the strength of one coat, but the courage to share another. And even now, years later, I sometimes hear a knock on my door, a delivery left with no name, just warmth passed forward. Blanket, a bag of food, a letter that simply says, "You matter." And every time I see a stranger shivering on a cold night, I remember the boy. I remember the way his eyes carried both grief and determination. I remembered the sandwich, the socks, the cedar-scented coat, and I bring them something to wear, whispering the words that first saved me. If you see cold, bring warmth. Because in the end, it wasn't just about a soldier's coat. It was about a legacy stitched with love, carried by a boy who refused to let compassion die with his father. Years pass, seasons change, but I still pass that bench sometimes. The lamppost is still crooked, the paint still peels, yet the bench feels different now. Not a place of shame, but of memory. A reminder that the smallest acts can outlive us, echoing long after we're gone. Next week, I'll tell you about the forgotten child whose song silenced an entire city.